Now, here's the summary of the 1,100 cards that they gave them. And take a look at the numbers in each of the cells and tell me whether there's evidence of a relationship between group membership and criminal behavior based upon those numbers. Yeah.
No, it's exactly the same probability.
Yeah, it's exactly 5% of the minority group have committed crimes, and exactly 5% of the majority group have committed crimes. But when they gave them this deck and they worked their way all the way through it and they put it aside and they say, now, do you think that there's any relationship between what group people are in and whether they commit crimes? They said yes. And they said, I think that minority people are relatively more likely to commit crimes. People in the minority group are more likely to commit crimes than people in the majority group based on the data that you've given me. Now, why would they draw that conclusion?
Because we always hear in the news and wherever there's a crime, it's always from consumers and it's from a minority group.
Well, actually, there are more instances of majority groups committing crimes.
But they wouldn't be reported as much because they're not as special.
That's right. It's not and special in the sense of what's the most unusual combination in the whole table. The really thing that catches your attention. Just in terms of frequency at which you encounter these things.
So you get used to seeing majority over and over and over again. So when a minority came up, you'd be like, oh, your attention go to it
Right.
because it was rare to you.
Well, what's really numerically rare is this really rare combination of I belong to a minority group and I do the minority behavior. I do the unlikely behavior. That's the rarest thing to occur. Only 5 times out of the 1,100 cases did that occur. But rarity, like you see somebody with 3 heads, you notice it. It's an unusual thing that you don't see very often. Then that draws your attention. And if your attention is drawn to those rare events, and you believe that the world is one where the relationships are perfect, that would mean that only one diagonal has cells. There are lots of these, right? And there are these that draw my attention. I might begin to think that maybe this is the nature of things, that there are most of the people are in these cells, and relatively few, and that's true, relatively few are in these cells, and that there's really a almost perfect relationship between these two things, even though there are lots of exceptions here that I've seen in the deck. That's precisely what Gifford and Hamilton's subjects concluded, right? And what they attributed it to, here, if I can get down to this, is that single combination is the rarest combination, draws the most attention, and because those folks are doubly distinctive, this paired distinctiveness, they're in an unusual group and they're behaving in an unusual way. And that double distinctiveness draws our attention to them and makes us remember them particularly. Now as we're trying to think about what was the nature of the relationship, we remember those vivid, unusual combinations and say, that sticks in my head. Minority people committing crimes. Now think about that. Here's a case where there's no association whatsoever between group membership and, in this case, criminal behavior, but people will conclude that there is a relationship between those two things simply because of this paired distinctiveness, which means people could develop stereotypes about whether mentally ill people are likely to be violent. There's a minority of people who are mentally ill. Violent behavior is relatively unusual. When you get that unusual combination, it's attention-grabbing. It's also newsworthy. The newspapers will report if somebody escapes from a mental hospital and kills somebody. Right? It makes it newsworthy, but it also makes it attention-grabbing and can lead people to form the stereotype that, in fact, group membership is associated with these unusual behaviors. These cases, antisocial, aggressive behaviors. Okay. Another thing that makes information especially vivid is things that happen to us personally. So we pay more attention to man who or woman who information if we are the man or woman who's involved in the particular act. So consider the following instance. A bolt of lightning comes down and strikes somebody. Which person is likely to consider this to be a a vivid event, the one who's been struck by the lightning or the one who's observing the lightning striking. I think the guy who's been hit by the lightning bolt is more likely to notice the event occurring. Some studies have been done, like a Falk study in 1989, where they take coincidences. For example, what he did in his study, he asked everybody to give me your birthdays. And he had a very large class of 100 people. And then he said, I'm going to take all these birthdays and I'm going to see how many matches we have. That is two or more people with the same birthday. And there were a few such matches, right? So suppose you two had a match and you two had a match of birthday. But it would be a totally matter of coincidence, unless you were twins, that you had that match of birthdays. Then some of the rest of you didn't have a match. But it was just a matter of coincidence. Your birthday didn't happen to fall on a date that one of the other people in your class had the same birthday. Then at the end of the class, they asked, how surprising, unusual, or significant was the fact that you and this other person were born on the same day? If you were one of the people that had the match, you reported it was much more significant, much more interesting, much more surprising than if you were one of the people who simply observed somebody else with those matches. It's just a matter of chance where lightning hits, I'm going to assume. It's just a matter of chance whether you were involved in one of these matches or not. But that information is attention-grabbing. And that seems to suggest that if you have man-who information, hard work and success go together. If it's your experience that hard work and its success go together, you're more likely to be persuaded that that is the basis for a relationship between these two variables than if you see somebody else working hard and succeeding. It's not your personal experience, it's just second-hand experience from somebody else. So that's the work of Falk. We're more likely to rely on man-who evidence if we're the man who is involved. Our own experiences, we're more likely to fall in the trap of single-cell error, saying that shows the nature of the relationship between these two things. Not because we're so egocentric, we think that we're the standard for all human behavior. We're not quite that bad. But it's rather the fact that we're more likely to have that's the most vivid information we can get, the stuff that happens to us. And we're more willing to take the shortcut and conclude that establishes relationships. Okay, I think we're out of time. Let's pick this up next time, next Tuesday. There'll be no strike, I trust. I'm hoping. And I'll see you all then. We'll also talk a little bit about the papers that you guys are going to be asking. I'll also give you a little more information about the upcoming examination at that time, next Tuesday. So, have a good week, and we'll see you then. And I hope this thing is still working, is it?
Yes.
How lovely. Goodbye.